The vast control room of the United Earth Navy vessel Horizon hummed with tension. Captain Olivia Barnes stood with her hands clasped behind her back, her eyes fixed on the massive screen that dominated the front wall. The image showed a ship, unlike any human eyes had seen before, sleek, with curves that seemed to bend light itself, and a soft blue glow pulsing from what they guessed were the engines. "They're hailing us again, Captain," said Communications Officer Peter Wright, his fingers hovering over his console. Olivia took a deep breath. "Open the channel." The screen flickered, and for the third time that week she found herself looking at the alien who called himself Ambassador Kelvik. His blue skin shimmered under the lights of his ship, and his forearms moved in graceful patterns as he spoke. "Captain Barnes," Kelvik said, his voice translated through the ship's computers. "The High Council grows impatient. Your species claims territory that has belonged to the Viridian people for generations." "With all due respect, Ambassador," Olivia replied, keeping her voice steady. "Our colony on Proxima Centauri B was established 10 years ago. We found no signs of previous settlement." "Your scanning technology is primitive," Kelvik said. His upper set of arms made a gesture that the cultural team had identified as dismissive. "The markers of our claim are clear to any civilized species." In her office an hour later, Olivia faced the grim faces on her screen. The United Earth Security Council, calling from headquarters back on Earth. "They've moved 3 more warships into the system," Olivia reported. "Our readings suggest their weapons technology is at least 50 years ahead of ours." General Frank Collins rubbed his forehead. "Can we evacuate the colony?" "Not before they could stop us," Olivia said. "And I don't think they want violence any more than we do. They keep pushing for more talks." "Then what do they want?" asked Council President Sophia Ward. Admiral John Nelson cleared his throat. "Our xenoanthropology team has a theory about that. Lieutenant Hayes, please share your findings." The screen split to show a young man with thoughtful brown eyes and short dark hair. Lieutenant Daniel Hayes nodded respectfully to the council. "The Viridians have been sending us cultural materials as part of the ongoing talks," he said. "We've found repeated references to something called the Bond of Worlds ceremony. It appears to be a tradition they've used throughout their history to end conflicts between their own nations and later with other species they've encountered." "What kind of ceremony?" President Ward asked. Daniel hesitated. "It's essentially a diplomatic marriage, ma'am. They select a representative from each side to form a union that symbolizes the joining of the 2 peoples. These representatives live together, learn each other's ways, and serve as cultural ambassadors." A heavy silence fell over the meeting. "You're suggesting we marry off a human to one of these aliens to avoid war?" General Collins finally asked, his voice rising with each word. "I'm only reporting what we've found in their cultural materials," Daniel said calmly. "But yes, I believe they may propose this solution if our regular talks fail." 2 weeks later, Daniel's prediction came true. After another tense negotiation session ended in deadlock, Ambassador Kelvik formally proposed the Bond of Worlds ceremony as a path to peace. "We have selected Ambassador Xerix, daughter of our most respected diplomatic family, to represent the Viridian people," Kelvik announced to the stunned human delegation. "We await your selection of a worthy representative." Back on Earth, the United Nations Security Council debated the proposal for 3 days straight. The military advisors pushed for stalling tactics while they built up forces. The economists warned of the costs of war. The scientists pleaded for time to study this new species. In the end, it was the colony's governor who spoke most powerfully. "My people, 15,000 men, women, and children are living under the shadow of those alien warships," he said. "If this ceremony buys us time to find a real solution, we must try it." The search for a volunteer began immediately. The ideal candidate needed expertise in xenolinguistics, cultural adaptation, and diplomacy. They needed someone stable enough to handle extreme isolation from their own kind, and flexible enough to adapt to alien customs. Most importantly, they needed someone willing to potentially sacrifice years of their life for an uncertain peace. Daniel Hayes sat in the waiting room outside the selection committee's chambers, fidgeting with the cuff of his uniform. 5 other candidates sat nearby, each lost in their own thoughts. When his name was called, he stood, straightened his shoulders, and walked in. "Lieutenant Hayes," Admiral Nelson said from behind the long table where the committee sat. "Your credentials in xenolinguistics are impressive, and your work analyzing the Viridian cultural materials has been invaluable. But you need to understand what you're volunteering for." "I do understand, sir," Daniel said. "Do you?" asked Dr. Linda Foster, the chief xenopsychologist. "You would be living among aliens, far from any human contact. You would be expected to participate in their customs, eat their food, perhaps even—" She paused, searching for the right words. "Form some kind of intimate bond with your Viridian counterpart." Daniel nodded. "I've studied everything we have on their physiology and culture. I believe I can adapt." "Why volunteer for this?" asked the final committee member, Ambassador Eric Powell. "You have a promising career ahead of you. This assignment could last years, and there's no guarantee of success." Daniel took a moment before answering. "My parents were among the first colonists on Mars. They taught me that reaching across boundaries is how humanity grows, and practically speaking, I don't have close family ties on Earth. I'm single, no children. If someone has to take this risk, I'm well suited for it." 3 days later, Daniel stood in the Horizons conference room as Captain Barnes introduced him to Ambassador Kelvik. "The United Earth government has accepted your proposal," she said formally. "Lieutenant Daniel Hayes will represent humanity in the Bond of Worlds ceremony." Kelvik's eyes, large and an unsettling shade of violet, studied Daniel carefully. "You are younger than we expected." "I'm 32 Earth years," Daniel replied. "Considered fully adult by our standards." "Very well," Kelvik said. "You will meet Ambassador Zarix tomorrow. If both parties find no immediate objection, preparations for the ceremony will begin." That night, Daniel could barely sleep. He reviewed Viridian language patterns and cultural taboos until the words blurred on his tablet screen. When he finally dozed off, he dreamed of blue-skinned figures with too many arms reaching for him from the shadows. Morning came too quickly. Daniel dressed in his formal uniform, checked his appearance one last time, and made his way to the conference room. Captain Barnes waited for him outside. "Are you ready, Lieutenant?" she asked quietly. Daniel nodded. "As ready as I'll ever be, Captain." The doors slid open. In the center of the room stood a tall figure with shimmering blue skin. 4 arms were folded in what Daniel recognized as a formal greeting pose. As he entered, the figure turned, and Daniel found himself looking into the most striking violet eyes he had ever seen. "Lieutenant Daniel Hayes," Captain Barnes said. "May I present Ambassador Zarix of the Viridian High Council." Zarix unfolded her arms and made the Viridian gesture of greeting. Daniel carefully copied the movement. "I am honored to meet you, Lieutenant Hayes," Zarix said, her voice melodic despite the translation. "Together we will forge a path to peace between our peoples." The journey to the Viridian homeworld took 3 weeks aboard their ship, the Stellar Harmony. Daniel spent most of his time in the private quarters they had prepared for him, studying language files and cultural briefings. Each day he met with Zarix for 2 hours of cultural exchange. "Your world," Daniel said during one of their sessions, pointing to the images on the screen. "It's beautiful." The pictures showed cities that seemed to float among clouds, buildings with graceful curves that no human architect had ever imagined, and forests where plants glowed with their own light. "We call it Viridia Prima," Zarix replied. Her 4 hands moved in patterns that Daniel was slowly learning to read. This one showed pride mixed with fondness. "Your Earth also has beauty, though different from ours." Daniel nodded. "I hope to see your world through my own eyes soon." "You will be the first human to walk on our soil," Zarix said. "It is a great honor." "And a great responsibility," Daniel added. As the days passed, Daniel found himself growing more comfortable in Zarix's presence. Though they looked nothing alike, her blue skin, 4 arms, and 7-foot height made her clearly alien. There was something about her that put him at ease. Perhaps it was her patience as she corrected his pronunciation of Viridian words, or the genuine interest she showed when he explained human customs. One evening, as they shared a meal, Daniel eating specially prepared human food while Xerix consumed something that looked like glowing blue crystals, she asked him a question that caught him off guard. "Why did you volunteer for this mission, Daniel Hayes, truly?" Daniel considered his answer carefully. "At first, it was duty. I believed I was well suited for the task." "And now?" Xerix pressed. "Now?" Daniel paused. "Now I believe this union can be more than just a symbol. I think we can build something real, a true understanding between our peoples." Xerix was quiet for a moment. "I volunteered as well," she finally said. This surprised Daniel. "I thought you were chosen." "I was chosen from among volunteers," she corrected. "Many believed this mission beneath the dignity of our people. They saw it as, how would you say it, lowering ourselves?" "Why did you volunteer then?" Daniel asked. Xerix's lower hands formed a pattern he hadn't seen before. "I have studied 17 species across our section of the galaxy. Humans are the only ones who create art simply for beauty's sake, with no practical purpose. I find that fascinating." The stellar harmony arrived at Viridia Prima on a clear day. As their shuttle descended through pink-tinged clouds, Daniel pressed his face to the viewport, taking in the alien landscape. The capital city of Luminara spread out below them, its buildings seeming to grow from the land itself rather than being built upon it. A welcoming committee awaited them at the landing pad, high-ranking Viridians in elaborate ceremonial dress. Daniel followed Xerix's lead, mimicking her gestures of respect as she introduced him to officials whose names he struggled to pronounce. "You will stay in the diplomatic quarter," an older Viridian who had been introduced as Elder Marin told him. "Ambassador Xerix will guide you through the preparation for the ceremony." The next 2 weeks were a blur of activity. Daniel attended language sessions, cultural briefings, and fittings for ceremonial clothes. Each night, he fell into bed exhausted, his dreams filled with strange Viridian words and customs. Xerix visited him daily, checking on his progress and answering his endless questions. On rare occasions, she took him on short trips outside the diplomatic quarter, to a garden where plants responded to music by changing colors, to a market where traders from a dozen different worlds sold their wares, to a cliff overlooking an ocean where the water glowed purple at sunset. "Why are you showing me these places?" Daniel asked after one such trip. "If you are to represent humanity in our union, you must know what you are binding yourself to," Xerix answered. "And..." She hesitated. "I find I enjoy your company, Daniel." Hayes. The day before the ceremony, as Daniel was reviewing the complex series of vows he would need to make, his communication device buzzed. It was Captain Barnes from the horizon. "Lieutenant," she said, her image flickering slightly due to the distance. "We've received concerning intelligence. There may be factions on both sides working to sabotage the ceremony." Daniel frowned. "What kind of sabotage?" "We're not sure yet. But be on your guard tomorrow." After the call ended, there was a chime at his door. Xerix entered, wearing formal attire he hadn't seen before, flowing garments in deep blue that seemed to shimmer like water. "I came to ensure you are prepared for tomorrow," she said. Daniel hesitated, then decided to trust her. "I just received word that there may be trouble at the ceremony." Xerix's 4 hands made a gesture of concern. "I have heard similar warnings. There are those among my people who fear this union." "Among mine as well," Daniel admitted. They looked at each other for a long moment. "What shall we do?" Xerix finally asked. Daniel stood straighter. "We continue as planned. We show both our peoples that this can work." The morning of the ceremony dawned bright. Daniel dressed in the ceremonial garments they had made for him, a blend of human formal wear and Viridian traditional elements. The material was unlike anything he had felt before, light as air but strong as steel. When he stepped out of his quarters, 4 Viridian guards were waiting to escort him to the Grand Hall. As they walked through the city streets, Daniel saw Viridians stopping to watch him pass. Some made gestures of respect, others of curiosity, and a few, he noticed with concern, made signs he recognized as disapproval. The Grand Hall was enormous, with a ceiling so high, it disappeared into shadows. Hundreds of Viridians filled the space, their blue skin creating a sea of azure that parted as Daniel walked down the central aisle. At the far end, on a raised platform, stood Xerix with members of the High Council. As Daniel approached, a sudden commotion broke out to his left. A Viridian pushed through the crowd, shouting words that Daniel's translator struggled to keep up with, something about purity and abomination. Before the guards could react, the protester threw something toward the platform. Daniel moved, without thinking, leaping forward to knock the object away. It clattered to the floor and began emitting a thick smoke. The hall erupted in chaos. Through the growing haze, Daniel saw Xerix rushing toward him, all 4 arms outstretched protectively. "Are you harmed?" she asked, her voice tight with concern. "I'm fine," Daniel assured her. "But we should—" Another disruption cut him off, this time from the human delegation. One of the junior diplomats was being restrained by security officers. "Don't do this," the man was shouting. "They'll use it against us. They're planning to—" The rest of his words were lost as he was dragged from the hall. Daniel looked at Xerix, who seemed just as shocked as he was. Around them the smoke was clearing. As ventilation systems kicked in, Elder Marin approached them, looking grave. "Perhaps we should postpone—" "No," Daniel and Xerix said in unison. They looked at each other, and something passed between them, an understanding that transcended their different biologies. "We will proceed," Xerix said firmly. "Now more than ever," Daniel added, "our peoples need to see that unity is possible." Elder Marin studied them for a moment, then nodded. "Very well." The ceremony resumed. Under the watchful eyes of both species, Daniel and Xerix spoke the ancient vows of the bond of worlds, he in careful Viridian, she in precise English. When they clasped hands, his 2 to her 4, a ripple of murmurs ran through the crowd. "With this bond," they said together, their voices echoing in the vast hall, "we join not just ourselves but our peoples. Where there was division, let there now be unity. Where there was suspicion, let there now be trust. Where there was fear, let there now be understanding." As the final words were spoken, the hall erupted in applause. Hesitant at first, then, growing stronger, Daniel looked out at the sea of faces, human and Viridian alike, and allowed himself to hope that perhaps, just perhaps, this unusual union might lead to something extraordinary. 2 years passed since the Bond of Worlds ceremony. Life in the diplomatic quarter of Luminara had settled into a comfortable routine for Daniel. Each morning, he attended meetings with human and Viridian officials, helping to bridge cultural gaps. Afternoons were spent working with the newly formed cultural exchange program, where humans and Viridians learned about each other's worlds. Evenings belonged to Xerix and him alone. Against all odds, their political arrangement had grown into a genuine friendship. They shared meals, watched entertainment from both worlds, and talked late into the night about everything from philosophy to childhood memories. Daniel had even learned to play the chiming string instrument that Viridians considered essential to a proper home. Today, Daniel sat in their shared living space reviewing reports on his tablet. The joint human-Viridian science team had made significant progress on understanding the differences between their biologies. Such knowledge was crucial for preventing medical emergencies when the species interacted. His thoughts were interrupted when the door slid open and Xerix entered. Immediately, Daniel knew something was different. All 4 of her arms were held close to her body, a posture he had come to recognize as anxiety or uncertainty. "Daniel," she said, her voice softer than usual, "I must speak with you about something important." He set aside his tablet. "Of course. Is something wrong?" Xerix moved to sit across from him, her movements careful and measured. "Our medical team has discovered something unexpected." something that, according to all our scientific understanding, should be impossible. Daniel leaned forward, concerned. Are you sick? No. Zarex's lower hands made a gesture he recognized as her equivalent of a nervous smile. I am... She hesitated, searching for the right word. I am pregnant. Daniel stared at her, certain he had misunderstood. But that's not possible. Our species are completely different. We don't share any common DNA structure. That is what we believed, Zarex agreed. But it seems there is an aspect of viridian biology that none of our scientists fully understood. Our reproductive system can adapt when in prolonged contact with compatible sentient species. Daniel's mind raced to process this information. Has this happened before? With other species? Only in our oldest legends, Zarex answered. Such tales were considered myths, not history. Her upper right hand reached out tentatively toward him. Are you upset? Upset? No. Daniel shook his head, still trying to absorb the news. Shocked, yes, but not upset. He reached for her hand. How do you feel about this? I am joyful, Zarex admitted, her voice warming. In our culture, children are considered the greatest blessing, but I know humans may view this differently. Daniel squeezed her hand gently. Humans value children too. It's just, this is completely unexpected. There is more, Zarex said. According to the medical team, the child will carry genetic material from both of us. They will be neither fully human nor fully viridian, but something new. The news spread quickly despite their efforts to keep it private. Within days, delegations from both Earth and the Viridian High Council arrived, demanding examinations, explanations, and assurances. Daniel stood protectively near Zarex as she endured yet another medical scan in the research facility. This is the 5th scan today, he said to Dr. Alan Miller, the chief human medical officer. Surely you have enough data by now. We're dealing with something unprecedented, Dr. Miller replied, not looking up from his instruments. The military wants to be sure this isn't some kind of biological weapon. Biological weapon? Daniel repeated, his voice rising. This is a child we're talking about. Dr. Miller finally looked at him. A child with unknown capabilities, Lieutenant. A child whose existence could change how we understand biology itself. On the other side of the facility, the Viridian scientists were equally intense in their examinations. Elder Marin, who had performed their bonding ceremony, now watched the proceedings with troubled eyes. This has caused great concern among the traditional sects, he told Daniel privately. Some see the child as an abomination that threatens the purity of our species. And what do you think? Daniel asked. Elder Marin's 4 hands made a complex gesture that Daniel recognized as representing balance. I think that life finds a way, even across the stars. Perhaps this child is the universe's way of telling us that our peoples are meant to walk a path together. As weeks passed, the situation grew more tense. Religious groups on Earth protested what they called an unholy union. Military factions on both sides argued that the child posed a potential threat and should be closely monitored, perhaps even taken for study. Scientists from both worlds were both alarmed and fascinated, producing endless papers about the implications. Through it all, Daniel and Zarex drew closer together, united by their shared concern for their unborn child. One night, as they sat on the balcony of their quarters watching Viridia Prima's 3 moons rise, Zarex spoke in a troubled voice. The High Council met today in a closed session. I have friends who informed me of their discussion. Daniel turned to look at her. What did they say? Some members propose that once the child is born, it should be taken for proper Viridian guidance, Zarex said, her voice tight with anger. They speak as if you would be an unfit parent simply because you are human. Are all of them against us? Daniel asked. No, Zarex replied. There are those who see our child as a blessing, a living bridge between worlds. But the traditionalists are powerful, and they fear change. Daniel was silent for a moment, thinking. Earth isn't much better. I received a message from Admiral Nelson today. He said there's pressure to recall me for my own safety. He made air quotes with his fingers. But I know it's really so they can separate us. Zarex's 4 hands clenched into fists. We cannot allow them to take our child. No, Daniel agreed. We can't. That night they made plans in whispers. They had friends in both worlds. Scientists who valued knowledge over fear. Diplomats who truly believed in peace. Security officers who had come to respect their union. With careful messages and coded signals, they arranged their escape. 3 days later, as both human and Viridian officials were distracted by a major diplomatic conference, Daniel and Zarex slipped away. With the help of a sympathetic Viridian pilot named Trell, they boarded a small research vessel bound for the outer colonies. Where will we go? Daniel asked as they watched Luminara shrink in the view screen. There is a research outpost on the 3rd moon of Viridia Secundus, Zarex replied. It is remote and self-sufficient. The scientists there are dedicated to knowledge, not politics. They will help us. Daniel took her hand, their fingers intertwining in what had become a familiar gesture. Will we ever be able to return? I hope so, Zarex said softly. When minds have calmed and hearts have opened. When our peoples are ready to see our child not as a threat but as a promise. As their ship jumped to faster-than-light travel, Daniel placed his hand gently on Zarex's middle, where their impossible child grew. No matter what happens, he said, we're a family now, and I promise I will do everything in my power to keep you both safe. Zarex placed one of her hands over his. As will I, she vowed, as will I. The research outpost on the 3rd moon of Viridia Secundus was small but well-equipped. Built into the side of a crater, its domed structures gleamed under the light of the gas giant that dominated the sky. For 6 months, Daniel and Zarex found safety there among the dozen scientists who valued knowledge over politics. Dr. Nara, the Viridian head of the outpost, had known Zarex since childhood. Your child is a miracle, she told them as she reviewed the latest scan results. Everything is developing normally, if we can use that word for something so unique. Daniel smiled, watching the holographic image floating above the examination table. The child, a daughter they had recently learned, was clearly a blend of both species. Her forming body showed the graceful limbs of a Viridian, but with just 2 arms like a human. Her skin had a faint blue shimmer that pulsed with her heartbeat. Have you chosen a name? Dr. Nara asked. Daniel and Zarex exchanged a look. Lyra, Zarex said. It means harmony in an ancient human language and sounds similar to a Viridian word for bridge. A perfect name, Dr. Nara agreed. Their peaceful existence ended 2 months later. Daniel was helping in the hydroponics lab when alarms blared throughout the outpost. He rushed to the command center where Dr. Nara was staring at the communication screen with a grave expression. What's happening? Daniel asked. A Viridian military vessel has entered orbit, she replied. They're demanding that we turn over you and Zarex immediately. Daniel's heart sank. How did they find us? I don't know, Dr. Nara said. But they're threatening to board by force if we don't comply. Daniel found Zarex in their quarters already packing essential items. Her pregnancy was now in its final stage, her body glowing with a soft blue light that indicated the child's development was nearing completion. We have to leave, he said. Zarex nodded. Nara's preparing a small shuttle, but Daniel... She paused, her 4 hands making the gesture for deep concern. The shuttle can only reach the main colony on Viridia Secundus. We cannot outrun a military vessel. Before Daniel could respond, Dr. Nara entered their quarters. There's more, she said grimly. I've received a message from my contacts in the capital. There's been a coup. The isolationist faction has taken control of the High Council. What does that mean for us? Daniel asked, though he feared he already knew the answer. They're recalling all Viridians from human space, Dr. Nara explained, breaking diplomatic relations, and... She hesitated, looking at Zarex with sorrow. They've specifically ordered that any hybrid offspring be surrendered to the Science Ministry for study. The color drained from Daniel's face. They want to take our daughter. We won't let them, Zarek said fiercely, one hand moving protectively to her middle. Dr. Nara stepped closer. I have a plan, but you won't like it. 2 hours later, Daniel stood in the shuttle bay, holding Zarek's hands as Dr. Nara made final preparations for departure. There has to be another way, he said, his voice breaking. There isn't, Zarek replied gently. If I don't return, they will hunt us across the galaxy. The diplomatic corps still has some influence. I can work from within to change things. And meanwhile, I take Lyra to Earth, Daniel said, repeating the plan they had discussed. But what if Earth tries to take her too? Your Admiral Nelson is a good man, Zarek reminded him. He sent warning when they were planning to recall you. He will help protect her. The shuttle's engines hummed to life. Time had run out. I will find a way back to you both, Zarek promised, touching her forehead to his in a gesture they had made their own. No matter how long it takes. Daniel couldn't speak past the knot in his throat. He simply nodded and held her hands tighter. It's time, Dr. Nara called from the shuttle's hatch. What happened next would forever be burned into Daniel's memory. As Zarek turned to board the shuttle, she suddenly gasped and stumbled. The blue glow around her pulsed brightly, then began to concentrate at her center. The child, Dr. Nara exclaimed, rushing to Zarek's side. She's coming now. The next few hours passed in a blur of activity. The military vessel continued to orbit above them, sending increasingly threatening messages. But in the medical bay of the outpost, time seemed to stand still as Zarek brought their daughter into the world. When Daniel first held Lyra in his arms, all fear temporarily vanished. She was small, smaller than a human baby would be, with delicate blue-tinged skin that glowed faintly. Her eyes, when they opened briefly, were the deep violet of her mother's, but shaped like his. 2 perfect arms reached up toward his face. She's beautiful, he whispered. Zarek, exhausted but radiant, watched them with love and sorrow mingled on her face. She will be our bridge, she said softly, when our worlds are ready. The reprieve was short. The military vessel had launched a shuttle. They would reach the outpost within hours. Zarek recovered quickly. Viridian physiology was remarkably resilient, but she was still weak. As she prepared to leave, Daniel helped her dress in formal diplomatic attire. Remember what we agreed, she said, placing Lyra in his arms one last time. Tell her about me. Tell her about Viridia. And when she's old enough, tell her why I had to leave. Daniel nodded, unable to speak. I take this path not just for peace between our worlds, Zarek continued, her voice gaining strength, but for her future, a future where she can walk freely under any sky. The sound of the military shuttle docking echoed through the outpost. Their time was up. Dr. Nara appeared at the door. Daniel, your shuttle is ready. You must go now. She turned to Zarek. I've told them you surrendered voluntarily. That should give you some standing. Zarek nodded her thanks. Then she turned to Daniel one last time, placing all 4 hands on his face in the Viridian gesture of deepest connection. Until we meet again, she whispered. Until we meet again, he echoed. With Lyra wrapped securely against his chest, Daniel boarded the small shuttle that would take him to a human outpost where Admiral Nelson had arranged transport back to Earth. As the shuttle lifted off, he caught one last glimpse of Zarek through the viewport, standing tall and proud as Viridian soldiers surrounded her. The journey to Earth was long and filled with uncertainty. Lyra proved to be a quiet baby, watching everything with those remarkable violet eyes. At the human outpost, Admiral Nelson himself met them with a small security team. The situation is complicated, he told Daniel. Some factions want to study her. Others see her as a diplomatic asset. I've arranged protective custody for now. She's not an asset, Daniel said firmly. She's my daughter. Admiral Nelson looked at him thoughtfully. Yes, she is. And perhaps that's what everyone needs to remember. On Earth, Daniel and Lyra lived in a secure facility while diplomats and scientists debated their fate. Over time, As Lyra grew and showed her gentle nature and remarkable intelligence, many hearts softened. By her first birthday, they were allowed to move to a small house on the grounds of the Interspecies Relations Bureau, where Daniel now worked. But every night, as he tucked Lyra into bed, Daniel would point to the stars visible through her window. "Your mother is up there," he would tell her, "and someday she'll find her way back to us." As diplomatic ties with the Viridians deteriorated further, that hope seemed increasingly distant. Messages became rare, then stopped entirely. But Daniel never stopped watching the stars, never stopped telling Lyra about her other parent, never stopped believing that somehow, someday they would be a family again. 7 years passed like a dream. Daniel, now director of the Interspecies Relations Bureau, sat in his office reviewing reports on the latest failed attempt to re-establish contact with the Viridians. Since the isolationist government had taken power, the once promising relationship between the species had withered to almost nothing. His desk communicator buzzed. "Director Hayes, Lyra's school is calling. She's had another incident." Daniel sighed. "I'll be right there." 30 minutes later, he walked into the principal's office of the Special Education Center, where his 12-year-old daughter sat with her arms crossed. Her skin, a pale blue that darkened when she was upset, was currently several shades deeper than normal. "She broke the simulation equipment," Principal Garcia said without preamble. "Again." Daniel glanced at his daughter. "Lyra?" The girl looked up, her violet eyes flashing. It was wrong. The history program showed Viridians as aggressive invaders. That's not true. "Honey, we've talked about this," Daniel said gently. "When you find mistakes, you're supposed to report them, not try to fix the equipment yourself." "I did report it. 3 times. Lyra stood up, her movements showing the natural grace she had inherited from her Viridian parent. Though she had only 2 arms like her human father, they were longer and more flexible than a typical human's. Nobody listened. Daniel turned to the principal. "Is this true?" Principal Garcia had the grace to look uncomfortable. "We've been waiting for the review committee to approve changes to the curriculum. These things take time." 7 years isn't enough time?" Lyra asked sharply. "Lyra," Daniel warned. Though privately he agreed with her frustration. The ride home was quiet. Their house, located on the edge of the Bureau's compound, was small but comfortable. As Daniel prepared dinner, Lyra sat at the kitchen table, working on a complex mathematical puzzle that would have challenged most adult humans. "Dad," she said suddenly, "do you think Mom is ever coming back?" Daniel nearly dropped the pan he was holding. They spoke about Xerix often, but Lyra rarely asked this particular question. "I hope so," he answered carefully. "I've never stopped believing she will." "The other kids say I'm weird," Lyra continued, not looking up from her puzzle. "Not just because of how I look, but because I keep talking about someone who abandoned us." "Your mother didn't abandon us," Daniel said firmly, setting down the pan and joining her at the table. "She sacrificed everything to keep you safe." Lyra finally looked up. "Then why hasn't she contacted us? Not even once in 7 years?" Daniel didn't have a good answer. The truth was he had begun to fear the worst, that Xerix had been silenced permanently by the isolationist government. But he couldn't share such dark thoughts with his daughter. "Sometimes," he said carefully, "doing the right thing takes much longer than we expect." That night, as Daniel tucked Lyra into bed, they followed their usual routine. He pointed to the stars visible through her window. "Your mother is up there," he said. But for the first time, Lyra didn't smile at their ritual. "I know, Dad," she said, turning away. "You always say that." In the early hours of the morning, Daniel was jolted awake by the sound of alarms. Red emergency lights flashed throughout the house. "Perimeter breach," announced the automated security system. "Unknown vessel approaching." Daniel rushed to Lyra's room, finding her already awake and looking out her window. "Dad," she whispered, "look, in the sky above their house, a ship unlike any human vessel moved silently through the night. Its design was unmistakably Viridian." Daniel's heart raced. "Stay here," he told Lyra, though he could see the hope blazing in her eyes. Outside, security forces from the Bureau were mobilizing. Admiral Nelson, now elderly but still sharp, was directing operations from a mobile command center. "Daniel," he called when he spotted him. "We need to get you and Lyra to a secure location. That ship isn't responding to hails." "Wait," Daniel said, watching as the vessel descended slowly toward an open field near the compound. "Look at the design. It's not military. It's a civilian transport." "All the more reason to be cautious," Nelson replied. "We haven't had contact with their civilian sector in years." But Daniel wasn't listening anymore. Something deep inside him, a connection he had thought long broken, had suddenly flared to life. "Stand down your forces," he said, his voice filled with an authority that made even the Admiral pause. "Daniel, please," Daniel insisted. "Trust me." The ship landed gently on the field, its engines powering down with a soft hum. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then a hatch opened, and a ramp extended to the ground. A tall figure appeared in the doorway, backlit by the ship's interior lights. Even at this distance, Daniel would know that silhouette anywhere. "Xerix," he whispered. He started walking toward the ship, ignoring Nelson's protests. As he got closer, he could see her more clearly. She looked older, her once bright blue skin, now a deeper shade, but her eyes were the same vibrant violet he remembered. "Daniel," she said when he was close enough to hear. Her voice, after so many years, brought tears to his eyes. He wanted to run to her, to hold her, but confusion held him back. Behind her, he could see movement inside the ship, many smaller figures. "You've come back," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I promised I would," Xerix replied, "no matter how long it took." "Dad!" Daniel turned to see Lyra running toward them, having disobeyed his instruction to stay in the house. She stopped a few feet away, staring at Xerix with wide eyes. "Mom?" she asked, her voice small and uncertain. Xerix knelt down, bringing herself to Lyra's level. "Yes," she said softly. "I am your mother." Lyra took a hesitant step forward, then another. When she was close enough, Xerix gently extended all four of her arms. After a moment's pause, Lyra rushed into her embrace. Daniel watched, his heart full, as mother and daughter met for the first time in 7 years. But his joy was tempered by confusion when he saw more movement from the ship. "Xerix," he said. "Who else is with you?" She stood, keeping one arm around Lyra. "That is the other reason I had to return." She turned toward the ship and made a gesture with her free hands. Down the ramp came children, at least 20 of them, ranging in age from toddlers to young teens. All of them showed the unmistakable signs of being hybrids, with features from both humans and Viridians. "How?" Daniel began, unable to find words. "When the isolationists took power, they ordered all Viridians who had contact with humans to be examined," Xerix explained. "They discovered more pregnancies. Other bonds had formed during our brief time of cultural exchange. The children were taken at birth, hidden away in research facilities." "That's horrible," Daniel said, watching as the children gathered nervously at the foot of the ramp. "Yes," Xerix agreed. "It took years of secret work to build a resistance movement. Many of us who had known humans joined together. When we finally overthrew the isolationists 3 months ago, finding these children was our first priority." "You led a revolution," Daniel said, amazed. Xerix's 4 hands made the gesture for modest pride that he remembered so well. With help from many others who believed in peace. Lyra, who had been listening intently, looked up at her mother. "So there are others like me?" "Yes," Xerix said, smiling down at her. "And they have been very eager to meet you." As the children cautiously approached, Daniel noticed security forces and Bureau officials gathering at a respectful distance. Admiral Nelson stepped forward. "Ambassador Xerix," he said formally, "on behalf of Earth, I welcome your return." "Thank you, Admiral," Xerix replied. "I bring not just these children, but a proposal from the new Viridian Council. We wish to establish a permanent joint settlement, a place where our peoples can live and work together as equals. Daniel looked from the children to Zarix to his daughter, who was already introducing herself to the other hybrids. After 7 years of raising Lyra alone, after countless nights of uncertainty and hope, his family was whole again. And not just his family, but perhaps the relationship between their species as well. New harmony, he said suddenly. Zarix looked at him questioningly. That's what we should call the settlement, Daniel explained. A new beginning, a new harmony between our worlds. Zarix reached out, taking his hand in one of hers while keeping another around Lyra. New harmony, she agreed. The first of many. As the sun rose over Earth, bathing the gathering in golden light, Daniel Hayes stood with his family, his human heart, his Viridian wife, and their remarkable daughter who belonged to both worlds and neither. They had begun as a political arrangement, become a family through love, and now stood as living proof that the greatest distances, even those between the stars, could be bridged by understanding.